Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. You may be familiar with some of my work on 9/11, which looks at the videos of Flight 175. Flight 175 is the second alleged plane which was seen to impact on the side of the World Trade Center's South Tower. There is now a huge question which is yet to be satisfactorily answered, which is, what were we really looking at? My preliminary conclusion on this event is that the videos filmed by many members of the public were real, but the alleged plane was to at least some degree fake. Its impact speed was completely impossible for a 767 at sea level, and its impact dynamics were not consistent with a hollow aluminium tube impacting on the side of a steel-framed structure. Today's guest has been involved in researching the planes on 9/11 and has analysed all the footage with great attention to detail. Not only that, he has attempted to get to the bottom of who is trying to muddy the waters with regards to what really happened regarding the planes. I'd like to welcome onto the show Mark Conlon, who is joined today by 9/11 researcher Andrew Johnson. Welcome, Mark.
Pleasure to be here, Richard.
And welcome back, Andrew.
Thanks for inviting me back.
All right, then. So I'm just going to start by mentioning that there were actually 4 sites where planes were allegedly involved on the day of 9/11. We've got Shanksville, the Pentagon, and also the 2 at the World Trade Centers. So these occurred at 8:46 World Trade Center 1, 3 minutes past 9 World Trade Center 2, 9:35 at the Pentagon, and then Shanksville, Pennsylvania, 3 minutes past 10. So we're going to touch on them all, but primarily the World Trade Center. Just fill us in first on the last one, this Shanksville, Pennsylvania, because in each of these 4 cases, there's doubt over whether a real plane was used at all. In all 4 cases.
Right. Yes. So in the case of Shanksville, that appears to be the location where there's the least number of witnesses, and we just appear to have essentially a hole in the ground. And I think there's some talk, Mark, of an engine being discovered there, but we're not exactly sure of the details of that. And I think it's probably true of all 3 of us here that Shanksville site is the one that we've least investigated. Mm-hmm. The quote that comes to mind for me, and Mark may, obviously you might be able to add to this, is Wally Miller, who was the coroner, who said that when he went to the site there was nothing for him to do, there was no bodies, there was no blood, and then later when he was interviewed he became very cagey about this story, didn't he? And so essentially we know there's really no strong evidence of a real plane crashing there. The evidence at that site is extremely weak.
Right, and some telemetry data with regards to the plane itself possibly went further than where it allegedly crashed. Yeah. Just fill us in on that, Mark.
Well, the coordinates at the air traffic control, the last coordinates they gave, were 15 miles past the crash site at 10:03 or 10:06, whichever official time is correct. But that was air traffic control data. So that placed the plane's last coordinate 15 miles past the crash site.
Right, and is there anywhere where it may have landed beyond there if it didn't crash and actually landed?
Well, the official story had it going to the Washington area, so there may be an indication that it could have landed at an airport in Washington, not Dulles, which is in Virginia, is it?
I think so, yeah.
More Reagan National Airport, possibility.
Right, okay, so you would state that there's little or no evidence of an actual plane at that site.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything to add on the Shanksville site? I mean, we're not here to cover that today. But
right. It's not discussed that often because there's not that much evidence. But the only other thing that comes up is this supposed image of the plume, isn't there? There's this image of a plume of smoke. I think there's a barn in the foreground, and there was controversy over who took that image and when they took it and things. But even whenever or whoever took it, it doesn't really show anything but a plume of smoke, and that's not, we can't use that as concrete evidence that a plane crashed. That plume of smoke could have come from a different event.
Right, well, let's come on to the Pentagon then. Just tell us what happened there, Mark.
Well, alleged plane, was meant to have impacted the Pentagon, and again, there's a debate about the actual physical evidence. We've had CCTV footage released which doesn't really show a plane, especially the size of a Boeing. I think it was a 757 that hit that particular building.
I seem to remember there was one piece of footage where there was one frame where you just see the nose of something coming into the shot, and they were, in the mainstream was saying, well, that's evidence that it was a plane.
Yeah.
And there was no video evidence of a plane that I've seen.
No.
On a building like the Pentagon.
Yeah,
Right.
which was covered by a whole lot of CCTV.
Right.
Which was not really ever released.
Right. So have you looked at any video evidence, the video evidence that has been released of the Pentagon, and if so, what have you concluded?
There's only the 2 CCTV, and there's a hotel.
Sheraton Hotel, wasn't it?
Yeah. And that again doesn't really show a large plane.
We're at a hotel in Arlington, Virginia. It shows the explosion that followed the crash of American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon, but the video does not show the airplane. The video's existence was disclosed in 2002. A hotel manager says it was confiscated by the FBI. It was just publicly released as the result of a lawsuit.
You recommend this book regarding the Pentagon attack?
Yeah, I don't agree with everything in the book, but...
so just give us the title and the author.
Yeah, it's Pentagate, and it's by Thierry Meyssan.
Right.
And I think this came out in 2002, June 2002. And the hypothesis in here very much goes with a missile hitting the Pentagon.
Right.
Not a plane, and it goes through the debris or lack of any real plane parts.
And as we were saying earlier on, I think, Mark, this is, you know, this is kind of like the seed of the no plane sort of story, really, isn't it? Because it was at this site that the idea of a real plane crashing was first kind of challenged and then sort of put into the community. And then that, you know, because as I said in our conversation earlier, that's where I first came. No plane crashing at the Pentagon. And then we kind of extended that into the World Trade Center, which, because of course allegedly we have this clear video from the World Trade Center which shows these planes crashing, where we don't have an equivalent from either of the other 2 sites. So that's essentially setting the scene for what we're going to discuss next, isn't it, really?
So was there any evidence of people picking up pieces of wreckage of allegedly from a 767 on the Pentagon lawn? Just clear that up.
Yeah, there was. They were going rounding up bits of wreckage, although that's been disputed in this book whether that wreckage actually matches the plane that they suggest was involved.
Right.
Depending on different sizes of the wreckage and things like that.
Right.
And there was very little of it, wasn't there, really? I mean, in terms of the size of the plane. And I mean, the classic one as well is the Jamie McIntyre report, isn't it, for CNN?
Actually, it was Bob Franken with an eyewitness who said it appeared that Boeing 757, the American Airlines jet, landed short of the Pentagon. Can you give us any better idea of how much of the plane actually impacted the building?
You know, it might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual site of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon.
You know, and that was right on the day, and then he later sort of revised that story, saying, "Oh, he was just a bit confused" or something. I can't remember what he said later on, but so that is, of course, extremely peculiar that he would say such a thing.
Right. All right. So let's come to the World Trade Center towers themselves then. Do you want to touch on the first alleged impact first before we go to Flight 175? Is that what we've got prepared?
Yeah.
Right. All right. So there's only one piece of reasonably clear video footage, and this is the Norday brothers footage where there's some firemen working in the street. Is that the footage you're going to go to with this?
Right. Yes.
And somebody shouts something, and the cameraman pans up, because they're filming like a training video or something like that, and there's a huge question mark, we've discussed this before, about whether that whole exercise with this fire crew was set up specifically so that it could capture that the particular angle on that day.
Yes.
Because the connection of the Norday brothers possibly to certain organisations. I mean, you can find articles on the internet about that, can't you?
Yes, indeed. And then just the location, I understood that from the location of where they filmed that to actually see that portion of the tower, it's one of about 6 street corners in the whole of New York where you can actually see that site. You know, everywhere else it's obscured by other buildings and so forth. So, yeah, there was a whole thing about that. So,
do you want to start the ball rolling with regards to that the footage that we see?
Because we were going to talk about Simon Shack's role, wasn't he, in documenting what he thought he saw, and you carry on, Mark.
Yeah, so basically we're dealing with the gash, the plane impact, and just following that, Simon Shack has mentioned that some of that footage to be fake or has been photoshopped to increase the actual plane-shaped hole.
So we've got some of those images here, and so Simon Shack made this film September Clues, didn't he, in 2000? So it started in 2007, and this was one of the supposed bits of evidence that he was saying proved that this footage must have been faked.
Yeah, let me just set the scene a little bit more with regards to the debate on this subject. There's a large school of thought now that planes were not involved in any of these incidents, right? Yes. Something else happened. So there was fakery involved. The two camps that have came about are, well, all of the videos are fake, or many of the videos have been doctored after their production, or they've been completely falsified. So we can't trust what we see because it's all been manufactured on video. Then there's the other school of thought, which is that, well, no, all of the videos are real because they were filmed by members of the public. So what they actually filmed was in some degree fake, wasn't it real? They were filming something real, but which was trickery in itself. So were the planes fake or were the videos fake? That's the big debate in this particular part of 9/11, right? So Simon Shack puts forward the view that many of the videos in many different ways have been tampered with before they've been put out, and or even completely manufactured from word go. I'm of the mind that that's not the case, that all the videos are genuine. It's just that they were filming something very profound that was made to look like a plane. I'm just trying to get to the core of the argument. Right.
And essentially what we're covering today, I think, is essentially the efforts to cover up that, or discredit that conclusion about it being, a fake object rather than fake video.
So you think that there's certain people being put out deliberately to try and steer the argument down the path of fake video in order to distract from what may have really happened?
Yeah, that's correct.
So that's why you're analysing the likes of Simon Shack's analysis.
Yes, that's correct. Initially, I believed September Clues, and I didn't look into anything really that he was putting out. I thought I got the answers from what he put out and completely believed. Very convincing evidence. And it wasn't until that I actually properly just look at each point that he was saying that I began to understand that a lot of it wasn't correct.
Right. And I'll also add to that, because I was in exactly the same position, and it was really Mark's research, some of which I've posted on my website, that showed me the details of this, second layer of deception, really. So it's essentially Mark's research, which I looked at. Oh yeah, he's right. I need to post this on my website as well to make sure we've got the record of this, and it's put out in a way that people can want to study it, can focus and understand on. And that's what takes us into this first example of the gash in the buildings. This is just one, and we don't need. You've done a lot of research, haven't you, Mark?
Yes.
And we don't have time to cover all of that.
Right. So we can see here that there's damage to the side of this building, and what we're led to believe, if we believe the video is real, that a plane's wing has caused this damage by slicing through the side of the building, and we've got all this smoke. So carry on with your analysis of what Shack has claimed with regards to this image or the video.
Yeah, well, it's to do with the first impact. And what he actually proposes in his film is that the plane-shaped hole wasn't big enough, so they needed to increase it. So he suggests that the technique they used was photoshopping, and he came up with the saying, sort of label it was the black gash, which he suggested was to increase the actual size of the wing tip on the actual right-hand side of the building. And looking at it closely, I managed to get other evidence to prove otherwise. It wasn't photoshopped in at all. It was some maybe coming from a broken window. It was some fumes escaping, and the actual direction of the wind was taking the black fumes across, which dissipates and then turns like a grey-white colour, and then more or less goes away.
And we can see that in this sequence here, can't we? And we can't remember the name of this guy because he's got a difficult name, Jim. His first name is Jim, isn't it?
Yeah.
The guy that made this particular video. So in the first bit of this video, we can see this black gash that Simon Shack claims is evidence of photoshopping to make the plane wings bigger to fit the building or to fit the picture. But then, after about half an hour, that smoke or fumes, as you said a minute ago, has just dissipated.
It just dissipates, yeah. I don't think it's quite half an hour. I think it's less time than that actually in the video. But yeah, it looks like it's coming from a broken window and it's some type of fumes escaping.
So this is classic disinformation, because what Simon Shack said is not totally untrue, in that there was an apparent gash there, but it wasn't actually a gash. He's presented it as a gash, but it wasn't. It was a lump of sort of smoke in a line from a small fire inside the building or something. We know not exactly what it was, but these images and other videos as well, Mark, don't they, prove that it had gone. So he's misrepresenting the video evidence, and that's we're going to see several examples of this in this program.
Right. Okay.
And the actual wing direction is actually going that way, which drifts that smoke across or fumes.
Right. All right. So, what's your actual opinion on that clip itself then?
It's a difficult one because there has been a lot of talk about it, which I've tried not to let contaminate what I'm looking at, especially surrounding whether the hole was made afterwards, slightly afterwards, time delay, the wing, particular wing tips. But my actual opinion on it is it sort of does marry up with a lot of other footage and photographs that I've observed. It seems to be in sequence, so it's a continuity there of the actual plane-shaped hole.
Yeah. So plane-shaped hole was made on the building.
Yeah.
But you don't know how it was made. Would you say? Or do you have an opinion on that?
Well, there is talk that we've discussed about an energy weapon, possibly from the magnetometer data and the spikes in that.
Okay.
But overall, no, I haven't really gone into it. I've more dealt with the actual timing and what we're actually seeing, and whether those videos, all hang together in continuity.
Right.
The other thing I was going to mention, sorry to interrupt, but we wanted to just mention some of the names involved, didn't we? Because we had this list of names that seemed to be all part of this group which was muddying the waters, didn't we? And so, you sort of mentioned some of the names. Yeah,
because I backtracked to have a look at where the video fakery started. This suggestion that the videos were, fake or CGI. So we got Ace Baker. He's quite a prominent figure who promoted fake videos and the use of compositing. We've also got Simon Shack. But we've got some earlier researchers, somebody who actually went under a name called BS Registration. His name was Fred. We got the Web Fairy, which was Rosalie Grable. We've also got Gerard Holmgren.
There's also Killtown, wasn't there? We've forgotten about Killtown, haven't we?
Yeah. Of course, some of these names, they're not their real names, obviously.
So you believe people in that group they're promoting the video fakery argument in order to deliberately mislead? That's your personal belief?
From what I've looked into, I've sort of stumbled on that sort of opinion or hypothesis to what I'm looking at with the evidence.
Right. And
I'd also come to that conclusion in a different way, because they weren't talking about the energy weapon stuff. Certainly Killtown was one that tried to play down and discredit the directed energy weapon research of Dr. Wood, as did Simon Shank, you know, and I've talked about that with you before, Richard. And so that to me became a bit of a litmus test for these other researchers. In other words, if they want the truth about what happened with the planes, surely they want the truth about what happened with the buildings, you know, and it seemed that they didn't, you know.
Right. All right, we've come on to the second tower,
Yeah.
which is Flight 175, the South Tower. A lot more videos of that event, over 50. I reckon about half of them have got useful information in them. Some of them, it's just a brief glance. And 26 of them appeared in the video that I did, so I'm very familiar with them. One of probably the most detailed or most close-up clip is known as the Herzakani footage. Michael Herzakani, who filmed this. So just set the scene for us with this, Mark.
Well, yeah, we got Michael Herzakani. He actually filmed the second plane, and contained in that footage is some anomalies, like missing wing, and obviously the crash impact. Just seems Newton's law, just not there in the video. But this video has been tried to be discredited over the years, and this seems to be coming around again with like some other researchers like Steve Diak, who is again bringing up some old rehashed theories about it being fake, basically.
Right.
And not
So you believe it's an absolutely genuine piece of video footage, or was this in the NIST list of videos, this particular one, right?
Yes, it was, yeah.
So you believe that's genuine, and that it's extremely important to get closer to the truth of what really happened, which is why possibly there are other people who are trying to say, well, it's a fake video, basically. Right.
There's quite a lot of management appears to be going on, perception management, and which is what Mark has put in some of his articles about this. There's quite a lot of perception management centred around this video. It's pretty extensive, isn't it? I mean, again, we're not going to...
So let's assume, okay, it's a genuine video, which I've assumed in my... I've got no reason to believe it's not a genuine video. Before we go on to the disinformation, then, what do you believe it shows that isn't consistent with an actual 767 going into a building? What is that evidence telling us, do you think, first? And then we'll go on to how it's...
Well, basically, the plane crash physics, the impact, there's no collision. There's no any real debris falling off, you know, the plane on impact. And you got the explosion, that doesn't happen until the plane's in the building. And there's some other little anomalies where like, you got the wing disappearing, and it just it doesn't look real, so to speak. But to me, that is a real, genuine piece of video footage for other reasons that we'll discuss. How I draw, you know, can come to that conclusion. Really.
All right. It's just that. It's not what's being filmed is something different to what we think.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, fireball anomalies, as Marcus said, debris anomalies. You know, the wings don't break off and fall to the ground. Tail section doesn't break off. The plane, it's been called a butter plane and so forth, hasn't it? You know, all of that stuff. And so they've had to say there's two possible alternatives. Then one is, you know, it's a fake object and a real video, or as you've said, Richard, or it's a fake video of an object which wasn't there. You know, there's nothing there. But of course, the problem is for those people saying it's just video fakery is they've got to discredit all the witnesses as well, which is also you know they've really gone after a lot of the witnesses, haven't they?
Yes,
you know, like Gary Wells and a few other people. And then, as you said, the Steve Diak thing, and he's tried to say that it's a fake video because of this thing. We're going to show this picture with the smoke. So, do you want to explain about the smoke? Yeah.
Well, basically, he was on an interview with Jim Fetzer.
And this was quite recently.
Yeah, it was recent in
March
April.
2007, 17.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was in April.
April 2017.
Or February, around that time. And part of what he explained is that the Herzakani footage, that the smoke freezes in frames for so many frames, which he says makes it a fake video, basically. So I did a study to check whether that smoke or the fumes was moving consistently in those frames. And what I concluded was that smoke didn't freeze, it was, you know, continuous through. And I did some diagrams to try and explain that and demonstrate that really.
Right.
He sort of, the reason for the actual delay and the freezing of the smoke was to actually insert, you know, the plane and to do with the building. Basically, we gave him a time frame to actually use the frozen bit. So he's going from using some real film or video, but then they use the freezed smoke bit to insert, you know, the plane and things like that.
So why does the smoke appear to freeze then?
Well, it's to allow a time frame to insert the plane.
According to his story.
To his story, to Steve Diak's story. So by freezing the frames, it's much easier to insert a plane and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So his analysis is that the actual video is being taken, and then they freeze the smoke and they can insert the plane. It's far easier to do it that way,
right,
than it would putting it into a video, you know, an actual, you know, full video.
Right.
And I mentioned Steve Diak. I had a run-in with him in 2012 when he started this initiative he made a really quite a good video, and it was to do a 9/11 crash test. He wanted to reproduce, you know, a physical plane crash type scenario and compare that with what happened on 9/11 to show that it was not a real crash. And he, you know, was trying to whip the 9/11 Truth Movement up into giving him money to support this project. Yeah. And he actually wrote to Dr. Wood, and she wrote back to him and said, "What are you trying to solve? What problem are you actually trying to solve?" You know, and and I've written all this up in an article on my website. So in other words, this guy was known to me, and he's been kicking around for 5 years, and he's still sniffing around this Hazakani video, and with this new smoke analysis, which is smoke and mirrors, essentially, isn't it? Really. So, you know, it's and who's involved with that? Jim Fetzer, who again I've talked about at length with Mark and with you, Richard, on this program. So it's basically the same old people sniffing around, putting out this disinformation. Yeah.
So does the smoke actually stop at points in this video? Have you got an explanation for how that happens, or is he just doctored the video? What's?
Well, I don't see any smoke, freezing of the smoke in any of that video.
Right.
It seems to consistently move.
And I think it's just that because it moves quite slowly and because of the angle it's filmed from and stuff, you can persuade people that over that period it doesn't move when actually it does. And like you said, Mark, I think, you know, and because you went, as you can see, you've got part of your analysis on the screen. It's you've got to really break it down and measure it, and you've drawn some lines on and stuff, because it's actually quite difficult just to on a quick visual inspection to see whether it's moved or not. But that's why you went to this trouble, isn't it? Yeah.
Initially, if you look at it, it does look like it does freeze, and you're only dealing with 15 frames, so that's a very, very short. You know, in the big scheme, it's a very, very short time frame. So you have to work frame by frame. And I used a starting point, and I looked for characteristics in the smoke, and then I used the frames, so on, which shows that if you draw the line straight through, that the smoke does move, or the fumes does actually move still. They don't seem to freeze. Right. There is movement in there.
All right. So do we want to stay on this footage? Any points to make about this footage?
Well, this is Marcus Allen, actually. He, again, put out some information on the 12th anniversary, actually, of 9/11, 2013, about Flight 175's wing passing behind a building in the foreground. Well, he actually got the location wrong. He said it was, you know, behind the towers. And this was widely circulated. It had over 1 million hits, this, and it was shared, you know, beyond, you know, all over the internet, really. And it was completely false information.
Yeah, a lot of people sent me this. So we see, as the plane approaches the World Trade Center tower, one of its wings goes behind another building.
Yeah.
And what he's saying in this clip is that shouldn't happen. It should be in front of the building.
Yeah.
But in fact, that building is in such a position that it's correct, that the wing would go behind the building, as I've shown in my video. But another point to clear up about this clip, people have observed the left wing going behind the dark brown building, claiming this is impossible and proves the image is a fake video. If we draw the position of the dark brown building in the 3D model, we can see that the building is in fact in front of the towers. So it is perfectly correct for the plane's wing to disappear behind the building.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you did you did a quite detailed article, didn't you, Mark?
Yeah.
With you looking at Google Maps and other images from similar positions of where this building was, and that's on your blog, isn't it? And on my website. So
that was the actual what catapulted me into double checking all the points that were being put out. Actually, was that particular video. So I sort of had a general idea of the layout of the buildings in New York, around by the towers, and the trajectory of the plane, you know. So that stood out like a sore thumb, and that made me think, well, what else is wrong? So that made me go back in to start looking at what he was saying, and Simon Shack and Ace Baker, really.
Right. All right.
And then that this was essentially repeated by Simon Shack in the September Clues film, wasn't it? The same thing?
Yeah. So you've got the missing building there, which is from Simon Shack's September Clues film. And this gets rehashed, a lot of these points. Marcus Allen rehashed the buildings being missing at a later time than that in what was in that film. And again, you know, until you really look, it's very convincing evidence. Till you really look at and know the layout of the building.
Right. So what point is Shack making in this clip here that we've got on the screen?
He's basically saying that the Rector Street building is not in that footage, in the Pavel Harbour footage.
Right.
Because we're actually looking at the Pavel Harbour footage on the left-hand side there.
Right.
And it does look like that building's missing, but in fact it's not.
It's down to perspectives and where the shot is taken from, isn't it?
Parallax and things like that. Yeah.
And the other thing which we came out in our discussion a few minutes ago was we've got the building here with a question mark on it, the black building, and Simon Shack's put a question mark on it in this shot that he's got here, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And that's actually the Bankers Trust building.
Yeah.
And if anybody who did go and study this image would see that Bankers Trust building is no longer there because it was taken down piece by piece. So again, I think we discussed that. So, you know, throw that into the mix, and you know, you've got, oh, that building has disappeared now. Oh, that means that the original video could be fake, and they've inserted a building that isn't there, you know, and so forth. So that's where over time it becomes more and more difficult to unpick it all.
Right. Yeah. Plus, he's playing on the fact there that black building looks a lot bigger than the other building in the foreground. Yeah. So from the angle, he's sort of suggesting that black building should be higher in the actual frame on the left there.
Right, okay.
But if you look at parallax and understand that, it's not going to be, you know, the closer you get to a building in the foreground, that other building will look smaller.
Right, right. Okay, and what's the next image we're going to look at?
This is an actual, we call this the Fernandez video. This is in a film called September Clues Addendum. And what he's trying to suggest in the film is that he's looking at a lot of video films, and there's a chopper that goes round by the towers, round by the North Tower, just after the South Tower collapses. So the chopper comes in, and then the South Tower collapses, or turns to dust and then flies away. And what he's trying to suggest is that chopper's missing in a lot of videos. It's in some videos but missing in others. Right. And again, I went in and tried to find evidence to double check that, what he's suggesting.
Right, and what did that reveal?
Well, I actually found the original source of the video that is in his film, and that video is on a YouTube channel, which was uploaded in 2007, and Simon Shack's Addendum film came out in 2009, so it's nearly a couple of years after. Now his film doesn't show the helicopter, the chopper, which he names Pat.
Right.
Yet in the original, on the lady's YouTube channel, the chopper can be seen clearly.
Right.
in the zoom out if you're doing identical frame analysis.
Right.
And it's in the shot as well, a lot longer in the zoom out.
Right. So he's airbrushed. You think Simon Shack's airbrushed each frame to remove the chopper, or?
If you look at it singly, you could say, well, is it compression, you know, losing quality and things like that. But if you look at the bigger picture of that film, there's maybe a suggestion or an indication that he's maybe tampered with it, or, you know, removed it deliberately, or somebody else has. But it's not certainly missing in her film, which was put onto the internet, you know, 2 years before his version appeared in his film.
But there's several instances of this, isn't there, Mark? Correct me if I'm wrong. That he's basically said that this chopper is here in this video and it's not there in this one, or, you know, you should be, it's seen from this angle, so you should be able to see from this one. So, and he says it's not from that one. That means the video is fake. So all these choppers disappearing, or, you know, reappearing in the wrong place, according to Shack, and not just him but a few others, he claims are evidence of the video being faked. That's the whole thing behind this, isn't it?
It's to cast doubt on the actual video evidence record.
You believe,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is another example, isn't it, Mark, with the Simon Shack went into some length, and Ace Baker, and Simon Shack were then sort of, you know, were at war over this issue with each other, this sort of fake,
well, it was a fake falling out or something like that.
Fake fight or whatever.
So they were sort of on the same page, but it ended up that they had this fallout. Whether that's real or not, that's up for debate. But so I started looking at some of Ace Baker's explanations, you know, that he was proposing, and he actually made a film in 2012 where he actually promotes some of this in, I think it's chapter 7 called The Key in his film. I think it's called The Great American Psy Opera.
That's right, yeah.
Again, very, very convincing evidence until you really look closely at what he's actually proposing, and having a little bit of understanding of what, you know, some of the software that he uses and what's going on with it, really.
Right. So do you want to expand on that then?
Yeah. So he suggests that the I think it's the Chopper 5 video, the nose out. He suggests that particular video was done using compositing. So that's layers, different layers of the same video. So you would have like a first layer would what they call like a key, a luminance key, and that would create anything on there invisible. So and that layer gets put onto the other layer with the plane that's inserted, and then that goes on top of the original layer, as we see in the diagram.
So what happens in this clip then is that we see a plane-shaped object come in from the right-hand side. It kind of goes into the building, but then there's something appears to come out the other side of the building, and the camp that you're discussing here, they're saying, well, it's totally impossible for a plane to go right through a building and its nose to come out the other side. So what they've done is they were using video compositing, and the camera's moved a little bit and it's caught the compositors out because they were compositing it live. And the thing that they're compositing in there, i.e. the plane, has just gone a little bit too far.
Yes.
So it was an error by those fabricating the videos who were fabricating the videos live. That's what they're suggesting here in this clip. Right.
But basically, what I was trying to find out with that clip was he suggested that a Luma key was used to create the layer mask so the plane could go behind the towers.
Right.
But it's problematic because when you pull a key, like a Luma key, it's based on the brightness, and it sets a threshold. And in that example, it's done with the sky. So if you look at the example, it's the sky is black in that. That's where the key has actually been pulled. So the towers that are left are the actual like bit that the plane would disappear behind.
Right.
Now, there's one problem with that is when the explosion happens, when the nose comes out the other side, the actual glaring issue there is the brightness of that explosion is the same threshold setting in brightness as the sky. And when you look at the footage, you can actually see the explosion is black, which would have meant it would be invisible, basically.
Right.
So if Luma key was used in that particular footage, the explosion wouldn't have been visible.
Right. Okay. And so you believe, and I think you're probably correct, that that is a real video what we're seeing there.
Yeah.
So clearly a plane can't go through a building like that. What do you think we're seeing at that? Is that this part of the technology that was used, do you think?
It's possible. There's no hole on the other side of the building, although we do have the engine coming out. It's landed in Murray Street.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah. But yeah.
Since recording this show, Mark has changed his opinion on whether a hole was made being caused by something exiting the building. He states that articles like this one, which include a photograph of something exiting the building, were possibly put out to play down this photograph by including an image of the face of the tower appearing to show no exit hole. However, is the article being deliberately misleading by drawing a blue circle around where the hole ought to have been? Mark now believes that a small hole can be seen here, marked by the red circle in this image, and also seen on this image, being described as a possible engine exit hole. He also believes that this still photograph, which appears to show debris flying out of the far side of the building, could be the remnants of the exploded missile. So are we going to come on to the engines?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So some people have said it's just a smoke explosion, or some people are saying it's part of the missile. What are your thoughts on
Well, looking at the actual nose before it goes in and comes out, I think if we go back to September Clues, I think he has massaged his version of the nose going in.
Yeah, I've said that
out.
in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's been something, tampered with there to make it look more like.
Right.
But it does suggest that it does look like a nose that's coming out the other side.
I mean, looking at the original footage.
Yeah, it does suggest
what do you think is coming out the other side? What's your opinion?
Obviously, it could be the illusion, the actual plane, the image projection.
Right.
So
I mean, just speculating for a minute, we could say that, well, let's say it was image projection, and the technology is like, I don't know, tuned to the density of the air or something like that.
We're talking about 3D image projection.
Yes,
here. You're talking
correct.
about some way of using a plasma or some method of, so that you can look at it at different angles and it looks like an object in 3 dimensions, yes. 3D projection, possibly from something at the centre.
Right. All I was going to say was that the image projection wouldn't work on the building because the building isn't air. But if the image projection had been tracked, then possibly it starts to come on again, at the other side of the building where, at the end of the building you have the air again, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So the image projection only works in air. It doesn't work when it's sort of pointed at the building.
Mm-hmm. So what we're possibly seeing there in this video is a clue to how it was done.
Possibly.
Right? But if you believe that it was a video trick, then you've possibly been misled.
Yeah.
Which I think was the intention. Yeah. I mean, it is picked up in other footage from the opposite side as well.
Right, the event, whatever's happening on the side of that town, what does that show?
It shows a different colour, more of a grey, silver. And a lot of people did take it for being a nose. Even some of the news media said the plane had gone all the way through.
Right. In
some of the actual news media reporting.
Mm-hmm. All right. So
and there's a couple of other things that, Mark, we didn't get through on our run there was the location of Michael Hezekiah, because that was something they've tried to say. I remember hearing this years ago until you informed me as to what you'd found, that, he won't tell anyone where he was, we don't know where he was, therefore, because, he did use a tripod, he didn't use a tripod, therefore it must be fake, because we clearly don't know where he was. If you want to talk about that. Yeah,
again, I felt that point came up when I challenged Marcus Allen in his very first video. He came back with about the location, not being able to find the location where he filmed that from. The second plane, Michael Hezekiah. that point again is being rehashed. You find that way back quite early on, you know, as far back as 2004, 5, I think, where other people, I think it was BS Registration again, made videos about that.
Do you think you've identified where he was when he filmed the famous Michael Hizzakani footage? So
Yeah, yeah. It's very close to Carmen Taylor's video, photograph. And she said to Jeff Hill, who's a Canadian researcher, used to ring people up, that she was on the top deck of a ferry in Battery Park that didn't leave the dock. And my understanding of that, when you look at the two photos, that Michael Hizzakani was about 15 to 20 feet away from where Carmen Taylor was. Slightly different angle that photo was taken compared to his video.
Yeah.
But again, I felt from looking into it, that was another area to cast doubt over the, you know, the genuineness of that video, really. And yes, I did try and pinpoint that location where he was.
Because I mean, the thing with that was, which added to that, was Jeff Hill rang up Michael Hizzakani, didn't he? And
That's
he wouldn't
correct,
talk about the film at all. So
Yeah.
he couldn't come out and say,
No.
oh, well, actually, I was on the top deck of the ferry. And he was bound by some legal agreement, wasn't he, that he couldn't talk about the film and you know, and so forth. So.
Yeah, I mean, he may have sold the rights to what he filmed, and part of the condition of that may have been to not talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know,
Yes.
and some would then argue that, oh, he couldn't talk about it because he actually pretended to have filmed that video and he didn't, and he faked it. And the other reason is that they knew that his video was of a technology they didn't want to disclose, so that's why it was kept secret, which is, you know, obviously what I think all three of us would probably argue now.
I did read that a number of people were paid a whole year's salary in order to give the rights away to what they filmed on 9/11, and I've said this in my lectures that I suspect that's because anyone who got a close-up view, which might reveal some of what actually really did happen, the technology, they wanted ownership of those footages so they could just check them and handle them, I guess. So you want to talk about another video?
Yeah, well, we're going to mention just about another Simon Shack comment about the Hizzakani and the Pavel Harbour video.
Yeah, it's that common theme of discrediting that particular video. There's been quite an emphasis to do that. It's obviously one of the clearest videos of the plane that we've really got. And yeah, in his film, he compares the Pavel Harbour video, which is a different angle to Michael Hizzakani's, but in his video he claims that that's a re-edit of the Michael Hizzakani video, the Pavel Harbour. So I did do some analysis on that just to compare them and try and again pin down the location of, you know, where both of them were filming, really.
Right.
And you managed to do that, didn't you?
Yeah,
You've seen that they're on different streets and stuff, weren't you?
They was on completely different areas. Obviously Michael Hizzakani was on the top deck of the ferry that didn't leave the dock, and Pavel Harbour was a lot more further forward by the Battery Park tunnel area, which we've got on a map.
Right.
And he claims the foregrounds and the sort of like been manipulated to try and make two videos out of one, you know, when really they are just two separate videos, really. But what it does again is cast doubt over the video evidence.
Right.
And there is another factor in this which you reminded me of, Mark, which was about the edits to footage where the plane seems to have, it's just edited just at the point of the crash and the plane seems to have been deleted almost. So talk about that.
Yeah, again, this sort of ties in with the image projection and how well it was working from different angles. And I'm of the opinion that maybe some angles didn't pick it up so well, so it was completely edited out. An example of that might be the Bob and Brie video.
And there's a chunk missing.
Yeah.
Is that never been released? Is that true?
No, it's never been released.
And I think that actual video didn't come out until about 2006, was it, or 7? So that's about 5 years later.
Right. So do you know what the source of that video was?
Was somebody called Bob and Brie, wasn't it, who lived in this
right,
apartment. Dr. Woods used that in one of her talks because it shows the dust cloud rising up.
Right.
But just before that part, you hear the, I think you hear the noise of 175, don't you? And then it
Yes.
cuts,
Yeah.
and then you just a few seconds later, and you see the clouds.
So, the original person who filmed that footage, are they contactable to find out if, you know, why has their video got a bit missing from it?
Well, I've never contacted them personally, but there is a reference in that video to being a grey military plane,
Right.
which sort of ties into what we see in the other videos, which
Right.
is a little bit different to what a United
Mm-hmm.
Airlines planes looks like colours-wise.
Is that a verbal reference?
Yeah, it's actually in that video, yeah.
Right.
But it's completely edited out, the actual plane coming into the shot.
Right.
Like I say, I'm of the opinion that maybe that, you know, why didn't they fabricate a plane into the shot if all the videos are fake?
Yeah.
Why edit
Exactly,
it
yeah.
completely out?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if they're that good at editing planes into the videos
Mhm.
and having control of all them videos,
Yeah.
then surely they could have, you know, they had 5 years
Yeah,
to put a
well,
plane into that video.
All it would take is that one person who they're not in control of having a camera and filming
Yeah.
the whole situation
Yeah.
without planes, and then them leaking that to the media or the internet or wherever.
Yeah.
Right? They can't surely have control of every single person who's got a camcorder in New York. So, and the trajectories, as I've shown in my film, they more or less match
Yeah.
as far as I could show. So we look at a consistent trajectory.
Yeah. Which
Albeit-
again, yours disproved the Matrix shot in Simon Shack's film,
Yes.
that he claims it was all done with one shot
Yeah.
to show these different flight paths coming in
Mhm.
to the videos.
Albeit
And
at a
yours proved that.
completely impossible speed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, one other factor, again, in relation to this was that there's been no news network footage from the ground of the
Yeah.
crash of Flight 170. That I've always been highly suspicious of that.
Mhm.
And again, if it's the case that, you know, as we were saying earlier on in the conversation, if the news media had better quality cameras or they were closer to the towers, so when they actually took an actual shot,
Yeah.
you know, they'd have a bigger image. Maybe it would have been more obvious on playback of that image that, yeah, there's something not quite right with the visual appearance of this plane. So that's why they had to take control of those videos, which, if they belonged to the news media, would probably have been much easier to get control of.
Just to make a point, I know what a lot of viewers will be thinking, right? Because I always get emails with this question when people watch my video. They say, well, what about the real planes and the people on them then? What really happened to them if there were no planes near the towers? I can't answer that question myself, but I'm putting the question to you.
Yeah.
Have you-
I have met people who know them people who's on the plane. You know, I've met a person who's said that they know one of them, you know, flight attendants. Other than that, that's not an area that I can prove. So that's very difficult to prove. But if you're looking at the videos and what we see in the videos, it cannot be that plane that they're on. And I know the suggestion that Flight 175 was, you know, in Connecticut, you know, an hour after the crash. And it's also been in other places as well where they've...
Yeah, I think there is evidence that maybe they didn't even board.
Yeah.
John Lear has said that the flight manifests have never been published and they don't exist. But have you got a thought on that, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, same sort of thing. A lot of a mixed bag of evidence. Passenger lists which
Yeah.
disagree. Different, you know, they were changed from one publication to the next. The NTSB records say that 2 flights were scheduled to fly that day and 2 weren't. Other NTSB records say that 2 of the flights weren't registered as destroyed until, you know, after a couple of years after the events or something. Tail numbers were supposed to have been spotted at different airports after the alleged crashes. Many anomalies, but as Dr. Wood says, you know, how many ways can you get rid of a plane? Let's just say all 4 flights took off just as claimed. Doesn't mean to say they crashed at those particular sites. You know, them taking off doesn't mean, from a certain point, doesn't mean they landed or crashed at a certain point. They could have been, once they're up in the air, we don't know where they went. And we also know that they were running exercises that day with fake radar blips.
Yeah.
So they could have used that scenario to inject more uncertainty into where the planes were being tracked, how they were being tracked, etc. So a lot of uncertainty in those areas.
Right. I think there's lack of CCTV of passengers and alleged terrorists boarding the plane or going towards the flight.
That's right. I mean, there is. I mean, Elias Davidson's study. He talks about how there is no testimony from any of the ground crew to any of the hijackers getting on any of the flights. You know, none of the ground crew, the people at the airports and stuff, ever given any testimony publicly that says, yes, I saw Mohammed Atta or whoever it was get on the flight. That none of them have done that.
Right. Right. So there's sufficient doubt over, well, whether planes actually did fly and were in the vicinity of the towers. So we've got there's supporting circumstantial evidence which shows that there may well not have been those actual flights in the area of the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
So, is there any other videos that you want to look at, or any other points you want to make?
No, I mean, we might send you some to put in with this video, but I think, you know, we've covered all the lists that I'd made with Mark. So.
Yeah. People. The other thing that people always want to know, and they always ask, is, well, come on, then tell us what it was. Tell us how they did it. Which we weren't there around the table when they were developing this technology or testing this technology, so it's a very difficult question to answer. But some of the clues in the videos that you've seen, Mark, you think it's, like, I go as far as to say that planes were to at least some degree fake, and that's as far as I've gone with it. They were to some degree fake. I don't know how the fakery was done, whether it was something which was a similar size and shape to a 767 but had vastly improved performance characteristics, which means it could go much faster, but was actually made of something that would melt into the tower, or it was an image. I wouldn't go that far, but what are your thoughts on that?
With the video evidence, from what we're picking up on there, I think a lot of the anomalies have to be explained. You know, that's contained in the videos. If it's a disappearing wing, crash physics, because it's the only evidence we got, and I think to try and control all them videos. You know, I've never seen a video come out that shows no plane hitting that tower and the tower just exploding. I've never come across a video like that. The only videos that I'm aware of that was, you know, that's come out have all contained a plane. And that's really what I'm trying to look at and explain them anomalies. And to me, video fakery isn't the answer for that.
There are versions of one or two of the videos that have had the plane deleted, like the Luke Corshin video. That's the version of that came out with the plane deleted from it. But again, we haven't seen any unique videos that are not, you know, that we've never seen before that have got an absence of a plane.
So it's just sort of dealing with that body of evidence really for me. And I feel that the video fakery is almost to try and explain them anomalies.
Yeah. But, and what about, you mentioned at the beginning, the Herzakani footage seems to go inside and then there's an explosion.
Yeah.
So do you think that was part of what went inside the building that created the explosion? Because it seems to project forwards, part of a missile which is now exploding. It's I mean, I'm more of a missile that may have been cloaked. Right.
Or hypothesis, which is suggested yet again early on in that
suggested
book.
in
the Pentagon.
Right.
I mean, you know, you had a lot of CCTV at that building, but nothing's ever really been released to show a plane hitting the Pentagon, which would clear the matter up completely, you know, really. Well, it would for me anyway.
Right. And there's the picture of the hole in the Pentagon, which is obviously, just elaborate on that, which is in the front cover of the book. Just tell us about that image.
Yeah, well, that's apparently the where the plane came out the other side again.
Right. So that's the inside the Pentagon.
Yeah, after going, that's the I don't know how many layers back.
About 9 rings, wasn't there?
Yeah, 9 rings of reinforced concrete.
And that was about the third one.
So it's able to penetrate through that. And again, the one of the main areas is at all the sites they find an engine.
Yeah,
of a
we're
plane.
going to
yeah.
come on to that.
Yeah.
So people say, well, there was a plane because there was an engine.
Yeah.
So address
Yeah.
that question then.
Well, I think it was at 3 of the 4 sites. An engine found in New York. Debate about that engine, whether it's the correct engine. We got an engine found in Shanksville and an engine found at the Pentagon. Again, seems like you find one engine at each site. It
Kind of
seems
like
to be,
one of those psychological
yeah.
triggers. Oh, we
Yeah.
found an engine, so there must have been a plane.
yeah.
Even though, you know, the one found on Murray Street, New York, it was under some scaffolding and there was no crater.
No.
You know, there's no like bounce marks where it had bounced along the ground or crashed into the ground. It was just like there under some scaffolding.
So somebody could have come along with a van and just
just dumped it, and it was relatively small as well. It was the wrong sort of engine. It wasn't a big aero engine. It was from a much smaller jet, like a Learjet or something like that. And the other one was alleged to have been from a Global Hawk drone,
Yes,
wasn't it?
yeah,
The one at the Pentagon.
right.
Yeah.
So there's evidence that they're not 767 engines.
Correct.
Then.
Yeah.
Correct.
The interesting thing recently is, you know, for me, that I stumbled on, I think you're playing to 2 audiences. You know, of people who, you know, you're managing the perception that planes are involved. So, and then you've got the other people who are questioning whether planes are involved. And you know, some recent things of articles that have come out recently about talking about plane wreckage at the Pentagon and things like that. So it's almost like the management of perception there. You know, if you can sort of talk about plane wreckage in an article, sort of suggests, you know, in a lot of people's minds that planes are involved.
I remember there was a photograph on Mail Online of you know, the undercarriage when the wheels come down. There was a wheel stuck between 2 apartment blocks in New York.
Yeah.
Years and years after.
Yeah.
Like someone wouldn't have removed it or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that brings us on to one thing we didn't mention yet, which was the recent publication of those images, wasn't it? Because
Yeah.
you mentioned that you put that in the article that you wrote recently. I reposted.
Yeah.
This seemed to follow a timeline, didn't it? So in other
Yeah.
words, this whole thing with DIAC, which we mentioned, seemed to be part of a wider set of events where they were, you know, trying to reboot the 9/11 plane stories again and reinforce, on the one hand, in the mainstream, the official accounts of, you know, Muslim piloted planes, Muslim hijacked planes, and on the internet, the video fakery. They both got re-topped up around the same time, didn't they, Mark?
Yeah.
Because that's what you noted on your blog.
Yeah.
You did forget to mention that.
Interestingly, around the time when your
You did
video
your tour,
was
Yeah.
took down from the internet
Yeah,
as well.
it was. Yeah, so that I think it was in October last year. I did a re-appraisal of the whole
That's
thing.
right,
So
yeah.
if you want to watch it, it's on my website. Go to the link on the left-hand side. 9/11 radar on video, I think it's called. It's about half an hour long. So that is my latest opinion stroke research on it. And yeah, it got taken down, but then it got put back up.
Again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also
Yeah.
my website got attacked as well and was taken offline temporarily. That all happened within about 2 weeks, and these alleged new images from the Pentagon were released in the Daily Mail. It was all around the same time as Mark put in his article quite recently. So,
And there wasn't really new images, was there?
no,
They were just
they weren't new at all. They weren't
sort of
new at all.
rehashed images.
Right.
But a lot of the articles had instances of talking about the actual plane crashes. And in one of the, I think it was the Daily Mail Online, they actually put plane remains in their front banner, which was, again, it felt like it was managing the perception of, you know, the plane story.
I mean, I have seen people post things about holographic technology and using plasma.
Yeah.
Plasma projection, and I've heard John Lear talk about patents which have been granted for projecting fake images of aircraft to confuse enemy aircraft, if they can do that. You know, I don't think it's beyond the wit of the military industrial complex to create an image of a plane in the sky that can be seen from all directions.
Yeah.
Whether it's done that way, I don't know, or whether that's what happened, I don't know. It's a difficult one to know what really happened.
I mean, we do have instances of other planes in the vicinity when Flight 175 hit the towers. You know, almost like paralleling, you know, to the actual plane crash. In some videos, there's like a white plane.
That's right.
That's in the background.
Right.
And I've got other photographs where there's another plane flying more or less over as well.
Right.
And they appear to be like jetliner type planes. So,
right.
you know.
All right. So if they could be an AWACS type plane as well, I
Yeah.
suppose, if they're that size.
Yeah.
Maybe involved in some way. Right. Yeah. All right. And have you spoken to Dr. Wood about the plane issue? She tends to sort of, stick to the physical evidence of the towers and what happened to the towers. I know that she is interested in that evidence, but just tell us about. Just give us a.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, she has always maintained that the plane stories are a distraction. But she has, you know, she obviously sort of collaborated with Morgan Reynolds, who had done all the work on the court case based around the lack of plane crash evidence and using that as a way of, prosecuting NIST, Contractors for Science Fraud. So she had worked with him, and I know that they discussed it, and they did actually produce an article, you know, years back, 10, 11 years ago, where Morgan Reynolds talks about the size of the holes of the planes, and I know that Dr. Wood did collaborate with him on some of that article and some of those issues, but she is, I think rightfully so, kept away from it until she's had more chance to study more of the evidence so that she can present it, I should say, in a way that she feels more comfortable.
Right, thanks for that, Andrew. And it's a very intriguing argument, and we're not quite at the bottom of it yet, but hopefully one day we will be. And if there is anyone on the inside who works for Military Industrial Complex, who's seen this type of technology, who's got a conscience, and who wants to contact us anonymously with information, whatever you may have, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.